It's the Morning Marketing Machine, here to grow your e-commerce business with proven marketing strategies and tactics, so you can run your business with machine-like precision. My name is Douglas Levin. Let's dive in. Welcome to Morning Marketing Machine, and today I've got a very special guest. Troy Johnston is the co-founder of Seller Tools, a robust site of optimization tools leveraging actual Amazon data. They're like the only one that does this. He sold one of his flagship brands for multiple seven figures and quickly moved to consulting for 8 and 9 figure clients on Amazon. You can find Troy and amazing community. I'm actually part of the community too of FBA sellers through the Facebook community FBA King. So thank you so much for coming on, Troy.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, everyone knows about Seller Tools at this point, especially in the chatbot community. So I'm excited to have you here.
Yeah, thanks.
So for anyone that doesn't know, I mean, I think at this point, many people at least know about Seller Tools if they don't know about you. Can you tell a little bit about like how you got started in terms of like on Amazon, the e-commerce space? So for anyone that may not know.
Yeah, so I started selling back in 2014, kind of the old days now of Amazon FBA. But I came from a more corporate background, was looking at new opportunities, kind of side hustle, different ways of generating a different stream of income, and saw this FBA opportunity kind of spring up. Indirectly, I actually got connected through a real estate investing group who were an affiliates for an Amazon FBA course. So it really kind of fell into my lap as to, okay, this physical product business, it wasn't quite as proven at that time. There wasn't the success stories necessarily that there was today, but it was viable. In theory, it looked like it was a strategy that made a lot of sense. So got started then with, at that point in time, one of my colleagues, we were both kind of kicking off our FBA businesses, both got started in health and beauty, and we're really kind of pushing each other to really substantiate our brands, grow our businesses. And then as you alluded to, after I kind of built and scaled that brand, I ended up selling it about 2.5 years in. And that was great acquisition to go through that process and move very quickly into then advising and consulting for brands, kind of in similar categories, higher sales velocity, kind of higher revenue spaces, and looking for what's next. They're always looking for, what's the most sophisticated Amazon strategy, what's the bleeding cutting edge. Really from there, from consulting and advising, Seller Tools was another opportunity that really kind of fell into my lap. Through my network, I was able to connect with some of my business partners now, who were developing tools essentially for their own businesses. They weren't thinking about, how do we make these broadly available? How do we, put these in the hands of sellers? It was truly, how do we solve some of our own needs, develop them, invest in some of those solutions. And then as I came along, it was, hey, let's maybe broaden this up a little bit and see if, this really resonates with the larger community. So it's been great to be in the SaaS space. It's very unique. It's like selling on Amazon. It's got its own kind of set of challenges and nuances. We still deal, of course, with Amazon volatility, but it's been great to carry that philosophy of what as sellers do we want to give us a truly competitive advantage. And then we're often thinking about safeguarding our time. How do we automate those activities, ideally the high value activities, getting on page one, capturing more reviews, reliably bringing new products to market, and then rinsing and repeating that. But it's all rooted in what works on Amazon and how can we develop tools to leverage that reality.
Oh, that's really cool. And there's a lot there in terms of what you talked about that I want to kind of go over a little bit as well. You kind of glossed over a little bit, but it's a big deal in terms of like, all right, you started in 2014, and then within like 2.5 years, you're able to sell your brand and sell it for over seven figures. So like, can you go a little bit into like how someone who's just getting started and doesn't really know anything at all in terms of the e-commerce space goes from there and within 2-3 years gets to that level, as it's not as easy as what you just said. So kind of interested in terms of like how that came about, like what all that was.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said it. It wasn't easy. The time was a little bit different. Like I said, I think a lot of people have this rosy picture of that time in selling an FBA, and there were parts and aspects. There were certain levers to pull that were gave a bit more predictable outcomes. And so it's sort of like today's mini chat, where like if you really get into that realm, you can predictably be ranked and you predictably get reviews. So there is parallels there. But really, if you were, and I really tried to be this way. I come from a far more conservative background, slower to maybe take more risk, a little bit more risk averse. But it did help at that time to kind of surround myself with people that were far more entrepreneurial. And I really started to see, okay, this proven model focusing on leverage. Leverage is always the key and operative term. It was the idea of sending 100 units to Amazon and landing at somebody's doorstep in 2 days. It was just the FBA model is so fantastic, and we often overlook it. I think we kind of take it for granted, how elegant it is. And so at that point in time, I started in the health and beauty space. That was the where that flagship brand, the category it was selling in, and it was very much trial by fire. I mean, even though there were things that were some of the more obvious levers that we were hyper aggressive with. I mean, even in the outset, tens of thousands of dollars of just trying to deploy as much capital to continue to pull those levers and see what was really effective. But then also rinse and repeating. We very quickly went from one SKU to three SKUs to a dozen SKUs, and at the time of sale, it was 27 SKUs in that period of time. So, I mean, we almost just under a SKU a month, which is in my eyes quite aggressive. And
Yeah.
I really try to unify that too across the product line. Is being in that space, how can we the products were focused on natural and organic solutions, and how can we sort of own that customer experience, own what they do day in and day out in the bathroom of whether it's a serum, a moisturizer, a cleanser, shampoo, conditioner. Like if we can check off all those boxes and everything that they see in their bathroom is our products, we can increase that LTV, build more brand equity and brand loyalty. And that really helps a lot with some of the exponential growth. And obviously too, that ties into, different loyalty, subscribe and save through Amazon. So there is that continuity. But yeah, that was really the seed of it. I was very fortunate, I would say, to have FBA kind of find me. And then it was a more aggressive stance with the right people in my network that helped kind of address what, for lack of a better word, some of my shortcomings of being more conservative and risk averse and being willing to say, hey, if I put $1 in and get $2 back, well, then really load up, deploy that capital, do it so strategically, but then always have an eye for what Amazon rewards. I think that true 80-20 of FBA is what is that continuous thread. Is there's a reason why you're selling on Amazon. It is, yes, the FBA and the logistics, but it's also the idea that you can understand what Amazon rewards and repeatedly do that, and ideally automate the types of activities that give you the outcomes that ultimately, again, Amazon effectively rewards.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that a lot of what you were saying too, it translates like we get stuck in this Amazon bubble a lot of times. I can't tell you the amount of times I've heard someone say I'm an Amazon seller or something like that. But the strategies that you were just talking about, like lifetime value and how to differentiate your product line and launching new products, everything that goes with the customer experience, like these are things that are universal anywhere you're trying to sell if you're trying to actually create a real brand. And that's, I would assume, part of the reason why you were able to ultimately sell it for what you were, is that it wasn't just, oh, I'm an Amazon seller. You actually had all of those things in place at that point. And you were talking as well about like the fact that you were able to get that many SKUs every month. I mean, how were you able to get that in action so quickly?
Yeah, it was really a bulk of that activity was looking at existing partners and relationships and sort of leaning on some of their subject matter expertise. When they knew certain products derive, you achieve these certain benefits for these types of products. And then you think about that regimen, the routine, which is very intuitive. It's very sort of category specific, but I think that's a lesson to be learned no matter where you sell. What is that customer's experience with your product in any given day? And is there a way of extending, whether it's how often they use it or how they use it with a complementary product? And so that philosophy with the strategic relationships we had with different partners and vendors was, how do we just grow this? You know, if we have a handful of oils that offer very unique benefits, are they synergistic with other similar oils, um, or really just that customer experience, really? So we really tried to be aggressive with that, owning that regimen and routine. And it proved to be really effective, because you would see that too, where you would add an additional product, had very quick uptake into where we saw that with sales velocity. Then that would have sort of a halo effect across the brand, where you would see, you know, all ships kind of rising with each new SKU hitting the marketplace.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where I know I've heard it said numerous times, the idea of like, I think one of my mentors talks about it in terms of like when you're doing like Facebook ads or anything else in terms of advertising, the idea of be very careful in terms of cut your losers quick, but then when you get something that works, you want to be as aggressive as that on that as possible and scale that as much as you can. And that's obviously what you were guys doing in your case, right? Just kind of like, all right, this works. Let's go all in on it and keep pushing it, right? Um,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So obviously I would be remiss if I didn't talk about after and everything that you've been doing since in terms of seller tools. So we were talking a little bit beforehand because like I've known about seller tools before the whole ManyChat craziness has happened to you guys, but everyone knows you guys now. Like you do a whole lot more than just ManyChat, but I know that everybody I talk to is always like, oh yeah, the guys who do ManyChat stuff. So can you talk a little bit about in terms of seller tools, like what is it that you can do with ManyChat and everything else that you can do in terms of with seller tools?
Yeah, honestly, it's bittersweet in many ways, because there is so much that you can do. It can almost feel intimidating. So we know that as offering some of the solutions and features, and some of the ways that we try to address that to make it easy for the first time business owner, somebody who's just getting started in FBA and is like, hey, I see the success with ManyChat. How can I get started? And we address that with things like free ManyChat flows, but they're geared towards specific objectives. And I think that's where sellers have to think about what's some of the low hanging fruit and the most meaningful strategies that they can deploy. Seemingly small things, distributing single use promo codes with ManyChat. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using that, whether it's seasonality, whether it's Prime days, whether there's category specific promotions that you're running. Those are really fruitful ways of building your list, engaging that customer, giving them that value, realizing sales velocity. And you'll notice, I mean, I'm counting off. This is the beauty of ManyChat. Instead of PPC, where you're just focusing on necessarily ROI and it may be transactional, you're thinking about a true customer experience. And when you can own that, as you can imagine, that also impacts feedback and reviews. And if you can organically get exceptional reviews, that's really a great place to be as a seller. So there's a whole wide array of things that we can deploy and sellers can use for ManyChat. Without question, our most popular being rebate automation. So a lot of sellers will find us and look for, okay, full price buys in an optimized fashion. So how can I add that keyword in there to see the rank benefit, driving to page one visibility, and then automating things like review requests. So, and we automate every step in that, whether it's order verifications, whether it's having the right types of eligible customers come through, giving them rebates automatically, whether that's via gift card or otherwise. And then, yeah, it leaves a lot of room when that foundation is set to think of other ways that we can see what Amazon rewards, let's say. But once that foundation is set, you have ranking and reviews. Again, the 80-20 of success on Amazon, you sort of have those already, it's already kind of baked in the cake. And then you can explore some other opportunities as well.
Really cool. This is, I guess, one of the things. If you're familiar with the book, "The One Thing" by Gary Keller, he always talks about the idea of like, what's your most important thing, and obviously, like, since as like a SaaS company, like, and you specifically, I'm asking as well, like at this point, with whether it's seller tools or just other projects, what's your most important thing that you're trying to work on right now?
Yeah, seller tools is definitely my main focus. And I'd like to think it's benefited from a more singular focus. The opportunity that is Amazon FBA, it's hard to close that door. So we do still have a few brands that are coming online, and excited for that. And I think that's also important too, is we want to still be sellers that are offering tools I think that can be a challenge. Our space creates a lot of opportunity to a point where maybe folks can be opportunistic, which nothing wrong with it, but we want to really say, as sellers, we've developed these solutions and they give you this unique value, versus just seeing, okay, we see e-commerce absolutely exploding. How can we just develop solutions and take advantage of it, really? So yeah, and I'm very familiar with the book, and I'm a big. You probably hear me mention 80/20 all the time. It is truly the idea of where are you getting a disproportionate return and doubling and tripling down. And for us, I think, and for me in particular, Seller Tools is really the focus, and we want to continue to grow.
Very cool. I guess one of the things that you were talking about a little bit earlier, you were talking about the idea of masterminds. You were talking about the idea basically solving people's problems, and that's obviously how you got the Seller Tools going. Um, uh, and that's obviously like a main part of what we're trying to do as business owners. But it doesn't always come easy. It's the part that nobody ever wants to talk about in terms of that there are going to be setbacks. There are going to be issues that come up. Obviously, like you were able to build up like with your business partner and build that up. But like when you're trying to work on something, say for Seller Tools or for your business before you sold it or anything else you're doing, and it's just not working. What helps you at that point to overcome those setbacks and those stumbles that happen, so that you can keep moving forward like we're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Two things really come to mind for me in terms of, and I think for FBA, again, as a starting place, obviously you can build a larger e-commerce brand and really substantiate your brand presence, build that brand equity, brand loyalty. But with an FBA business model, there are pieces that are somewhat formulaic. It follows a sequence. Now that sequence can have its own set of hurdles and challenges, and that's really where you think about having that solution orientation when those come up. Is then focusing on who have you seen that's done it? Where's the proof of concept? What lessons learned or takeaways can you apply to your business? And then also making sure that you're not siloed off with some of your own challenges, and finding that, whether that's a community, whether that is a mastermind, whether that's even just connecting with, obviously with FBA, we've got a lot of really solid Facebook groups. Obviously we have our own Facebook group where you have these communities of folks that are pretty open with some of their challenges, some of their feedback, some of their experiences. And there's definitely, whether it's nugget of insights or obvious insights that you can glean from these groups with the lens of that formula of sort of seeing, okay, they're at this phase in their business, they're having this type of challenge. What can I have as takeaways and lessons learned? So I think those are the two biggest pieces. I'm a big believer in sort of reverse engineering some of your success as well. And this is where I feel like there's such a beauty to Amazon. It is a massive machine that says we reward this, and it takes some vigilance. It takes really some hard work to stay on top of what that is. But once you understand it, a lot more pieces become quite clear. And again, I think that's the beauty. If you look at other, whether it's side hustles or even different industries, there are things that aren't as straight of a path. And I've seen this with, on the other side of the acquisition, investing, deploying capital, understanding new categories, new spaces. I've really tried to add some sophistication there, and it's given me more appreciation of some of the formulaic pieces with FBA. So I think those are crucial, is making sure you're not siloed off, dealing with your struggles and challenges in isolation, and broadening your view, but then also seeing what's worked. And I think that's some of the successes and what I call the proof of concept in our space is studying that, being willing to kind of look at, okay, I'm trying to overcome this challenge. Who else has done it? Who else has achieved the objectives that I'm trying to realize? And really analyzing it and being willing to get your hands dirty with having a good understanding of that.
And you're obviously talking just now in terms of like looking at what's already worked in, say, the FBA space. So like, what was your process specifically as you were getting started with that, whether it was through when you were a seller or with Seller Tools specifically, where like how did you go about that process? Like obviously you alluded to it in a general term, in that instance, has obviously worked out really well for you both on the brand side and also obviously with the software. But like say someone's coming in, they don't have the first clue in terms of what they're going to do here. Like, how did that work for you? Like, what would you recommend for people at that point in terms to help them?
Yeah, it was huge for me when I'm starting my first brand to, you know, my colleague at the time, he and I were both working in the corporate roles, and we saw this opportunity and we kind of jumped on it together. And we're actually running businesses that are in some ways direct competitors.
Mhm.
But that served me, I think, in a few different ways in terms of having a bit more of a competitive nature. So a solid kick in the butt very frequently. Uh, but then also just the inherent, I don't want to say networking, it's probably too vague of a term, but it's the collaborative, open ideation, brainstorming. We were solving some of the same problems, which is very similar to what a mastermind does, where you have open dialogue, you speak to your challenges, you look at opportunities, and I think that's a crucial piece of the equation, is making sure that you are finding like-minded folks, ideally on a similar trajectory or at that same level, for which you can bounce some of the ideas and really brainstorm some of those solutions. So that was huge for me in the outset, and I think it helped to give me such a strong foundation from which, whether it was consulting, advising, or even with seller tools, I had much stronger footing. And that thread has carried through. I've continued to be very vigilant with who am I networking with, who am I bouncing ideas off of, and we do that sort of organically through seller tools because we're a group of sellers. We're sort of like, if we see something flagged in an account, we have an open conversation. This is what's happened. What do we think took place? How do we resolve it? So for us, it's fortunate that it's organic. But I think if you're taking a seller who's completely new to this, looking at some of the very first steps, I think you have to be really intentional. You've got to recreate that in many ways of that mastermind, that community, and obviously there's a lot of folks that go to courses. There's just so much free content out there now too, that you can get, I think, what amounts to a solid enough foundation to get started, to get the ball rolling in building your business.
Very cool. And obviously, what you're talking in terms of mastermind, that's the part that I know whenever I'm looking at anything, is like I always want to be the dumbest person in the room if I can, right? Whatever it is that you're doing, you don't know everything, and to assume you will is basically just setting up yourself for failure. At least the way I've looked at it, it's like all right, there's always something that I can learn from somebody else if I can, and so that's what you're kind of alluding to there. So. As you were talking about a little bit earlier, you were saying obviously like your journey in terms of going with your brand and going with seller tools. Like what started you in terms of like what gets you through those days? Like this is a question that I usually want to know what, like, because this is what gets you over those hard times, is like your purpose. Like, what is your purpose for doing what you do?
Yeah, I think we have such a potential to impact such a large and growing community. Um, the larger vision is to be sellers developing unique solutions and do so at a pretty wide scale. And obviously, we quantify that internally for some of our quarterly goals and annual goals. But I think we have such a unique take in the market that hopefully, again, it shows up to our users. All that sounds good and well until it shows up to our users, right? And their ability to not just maintain their business. And there's options for that. And this is something we've sort of realized, is that we want to be a growth platform. We want to be the type of business and type of solution that lets our users, our clients, our customers grow their business, because the saturation that you're seeing, the opportunity that it's creating, there is not going to be a shortage of people trying to capitalize on that demand. So you're going to continue to see this influx of activity. And if you're a brand owner and you're thinking, yeah, okay, everything's stagnating for 6 months, everything's stagnating for a year, you really do run the risk of being out of business in a year. It's just, there's an abundance mindset that you can accept, but there is a reality too of the real estate on Amazon driven by keywords and the ability to win that visibility, that real estate. And so you kind of have to strike that balance in my estimation. And so that's really for us. Thinking about growth is key to the things that we develop and the solutions that we offer to our community, our users. And I think sellers have to embrace that as well. They kind of have to take inventory of, am I maintaining a business or am I growing a business? And hopefully creating some type of moat. some type of substantial competitive advantage that you can point at and say, hey, this is why I'm not a commodity. My brand isn't a commodity, but I've got something truly unique that I'm delivering in the marketplace.
And you just alluded to it in terms of like the idea of like always kind of growing your business and like Karen, was it Bezos who said or someone else who said it where like if you're not growing you're dying right um, uh, so I mean that's something you always got to try and keep push forward. Obviously you were referencing the ideas before with your brand of basically being aggressive. It's the same kind of idea there. That kind of brings up a point we were talking like what are the like I in this year, one of the things that I've been doing a lot more than anything I've ever done in my entire life is reading. And you were talking in terms of the 80/20 rule. We're talking about the one thing. Like, what books have helped you the best in terms of to get where you've been, like this level that you've been at, like in say the last I don't know year or so.
Yeah, it's a good question. One that has really stood out for me, and it's sort of it's in the vein of a 4-hour work week, which I have such mixed feelings about. But How to Be a Capitalist Without Any Capital. Nathan Lacka, obviously, he's a personality and a really a thought leader in the SaaS side of industry, and so very intuitive for me to continue to follow him. And I thought he had some really interesting, unique takes. And obviously, there's some more personal takes that he has for things like real estate investing and that type of thing. But his growth hack approach is something I really can appreciate. That operative word of leverage is something I continue to kind of look for in business opportunities as a whole, but then also for us as a business, because we're a relatively agile team to do a lot of the things that we're doing. But it's really it's the idea of bringing in really, really smart people to come up with unique solutions to problems or opportunities. So that one definitely sticks out to me. And I think that was the nugget of the takeaway, because some of the things were very practical and tactical, but it was the growth hack mindset. How can you take a few resources very smartly applied and get an exponential benefit? And usually there's a point of leverage somewhere in there. You're using some type of channel, some type of medium that has very broad exposure, that has specific elements that are rewarded. You understand it, and then you deploy aggressively. So that one really stands out to me. But honestly, I've been trying to read a lot of fiction at the same time too, because I'm somebody who I feel like I struggle sometimes with my imagination, and I feel like fiction really can stir that pot a little bit more. And I find that if I can be intentional about that, what was it? Einstein said at some point, imagination is more important than knowledge. And it's that idea of like creative problem solving comes from a place of in your mind thinking of what if it was this way, or what if we had a solution to this problem, and letting your mind kind of wander. And that's where with pen and pad has been really beneficial for me, of being intentional about getting away a little bit from the digital and like exploring more thoughts, going through ideation, doing more brainstorming, and then making that tangible. So yeah, that's kind of how I've been approaching some of my reading.
Okay. Well, I've actually been one myself where it took me a long time. Like I was, I guess for me, guilty of like I always thought it was I always just have to grind harder, and that's all that's how it's done. That's all you're ever supposed to do, and I've been trying a lot more in the last few months to like take time away and like to emphasize your point of like the idea of that can help you be more creative, that can help you get the juices flowing. Like, do you have like you were talking to, obviously in terms of like the fiction books that you've read, are there other things that have helped you specifically as you're like to get away or to help you to be more creative as you're trying to focus on specific solutions to problems? Like what has helped you best in those situations?
Yeah, really, my foundation, which you may be familiar, is following essentially a miracle morning type of formula.
Oh,
Where
okay. Yeah.
I'm doing whether it's affirmations, whether it's visualization, exercise has been key. I've noticed that too when I get back into more intense workouts and I'm focusing on breathing. I'm not quite as stressed when I come to a problem and I'm shallow breath and I'm anxious. I'm more thinking wholly and holistically. And that really serves you too when you think about systems thinking, that idea of up and slightly removed, and you're looking at more of the pieces in play versus being so in it And that lens can be really challenging to come up with, either solve bigger problems or come up with bigger opportunities. So that's been huge for me. And so part of that too is, of course, some amount of reading as well. So I try to make that part of my routine each and every day. But it's big. Even if I can only show, a minute of a meditation, just some time to kind of slow things down. I know it always serves me to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely one of my game changer books for me too. Was Miracle Morning. I definitely would recommend that for people. I mean, even if you're not going to stick with it, maybe, but if I would at least give it a shot. I mean, there's so like those 6 different routines every morning can change your life if you keep at it. So this kind of brings me into obviously we were talking a little bit in terms of attacking problems, going through it, talking about the purposes behind it. Um, One of the things I was interested to get your take on as well is the idea of a work-life balance. So is it like this mythical, like fictional thing that doesn't exist? Like is it something that you strive for? Like what to you is a work-life balance?
Yeah, no, it's honestly a great question. It's I think with this year, and we have gone fully remote as a Seller Tools team, so everybody is working from home, is that it's something you truly have to be intentional about. You've got to put guardrails on your work to make sure that whether it's the phone, which is kind of like the worst aspect of trying to, like, if there's one tangible thing that you want to put some reins on, it's a phone, because obviously it can go anywhere that you can go. And so that's something it's funny you mentioned that, because it's something I'm really been working on, and finding ways of what's a good excuse to keep it away from me at an arm's reach. We bought a phone soap, which is a little way of UV light to clean a phone.
Mhm.
But what's great about my hyperlogical mind is it makes sense to leave my phone in a phone soap, because something's happening. It's not just I'm leaving it somewhere or I'm locking it up. I've heard people doing something similar. So I think really being able to point out some of the things that you're doing different and understand your personality, like I said, somebody who's very logical, something like that has really seemingly simple has made a difference. It's made it easier for me to say, oh, it's on the phone, so I'll pick it up after a certain period of time, but not having it constantly on me. And then when it comes to work, I've got my dedicated office space. I think it's important to kind of have your working domain, and ideally having that as separate from sort of the rest of your life. And I do things too, like where I have certain amounts of time, work wraps up, I have that sync up right around the time, where I move on to dinner. And then all of a sudden my day is moved into life mode, and I'm thinking about family. I'm thinking about friends. And when I'm on phone, I'm texting friends, seeing how they're doing, but I'm not, focused on, a new feature that we're releasing or a new brand that we're rolling out. So that's really important. I know a lot of challenges that we experience that I know that it can impact many others is, time zone differences. We're a global company, so we've got folks that, whether it's a 7-hour difference, they're on one side of the world, and then we've got other team members on another, is being able to maintain some of that communication. But to me, that really just elevates the need of setting expectations, of having that communication level of, this is when you can expect to hear from me, more readily available, versus I'm going to probably be offline. It's going to take longer for me to get back in touch with you. But addressing that expectations game can be the biggest piece. But yeah, those are some of the things that I try to do, because I think you have to get tactical to make sure that you really do create more of a balance. Not to say it's not always in your mind, and that's where meditation, that type of thing, those types of things help to kind of wash that away a little bit. But really making work dedicated time, space, and then energy, and then breaking for more of life. What else is out there? And so the only other thing I'd add to that too is I've really been exploring more hobbies this year with us working from home. I'm actually trying to learn how to sing. I've been playing more guitar. And I think that's important too. I think what you define as life, I think it's good to double down on those things that are interesting to you, that help you be more creative, let you fail. I can tell you, for me trying to learn to sing, I'm doing a great job on that. But it's fun. It's a good time to learn something new, to fail your way through it. And it's funny how that then shows up in business, because you're like, hey, I'm willing to fail in the things that I'm doing by choice. Then I'm coming back into business, and you can kind of apply, or I try to apply that same mindset to why don't we try this out? Let's explore this. Let's try something different. Because I've normalized a little bit of let's see what works. Let's see what sticks when we try some things out.
So what have you been trying to learn, singing and guitar wise? Like what songs?
Um, so my singing right now, we've moved to the standards. I'm actually singing Michael Bublé.
Okay.
Yes. So I've moved that way because I was doing more songs that I like, but my voice instructor and singing teacher decided we're gonna focus on more of the classics. Um, yeah. So, but it's been great. It's been so fun, and she's been immensely patient with me. But learning each and every day, failing each and every day, but trying to get better.
Yeah, and that's one of my I can't remember where I heard it from, the idea, but it's one of my favorite quotes is there's no such thing as failure, only feedback.
Mm,
So and if you can look at it from that perspective, the only time you ever fail is when you just give up.
right.
And that's how we should be, at least in my opinion, as I'm getting on a soapbox with us as business owners. As long as you have that thought process, like you're talking about, like, yeah, let's go for it. And what am I going to learn from this? Like, obviously, we were just talking that in terms of singing, in terms of playing guitar, in terms of business too. Same kind of deal. And you can bring that to the business world. So very cool. As we're kind of like getting close down the home stretch here, one question I did want to ask as well is, this is a question that I was a guest on a friend of mine's podcast, and he brought this up, and I pretty much like that question so much I've asked it every time since. Is what's your definition of success?
Oh man, that is a good question.
Hmm.
I tie success, I think, a lot to freedom. I find it being very synonymous with the word freedom, which I know is equally abstract. So it's probably not a good answer to the question. But I think really defining what's important to you, success is immensely personal. When it came to really the other side of selling my business and thinking, do I want to continue to work? I think those types of questions, for me, it felt like I had reached a level of success, my personal success. Obviously, for other people, it's I've got a lot more work to do. I've saw it with friends and other folks in my network in similar situations, but I had hit a level of success for me that was the time freedom that I cherished was a potential. So I think finding what your personal freedom is what success means to you, and I think it should be hyper personalized. Um, yeah, because again, I've seen people just absolutely excited with their life with a tenth of what somebody else who can't, until they have $1 billion company, they have their unicorn. It's like, you know they're not going to be satisfied. They're not going to see success in their own eyes. Um, so yeah, I think it's the personal freedom that you want to realize, whether that's time freedom, whether that's financial freedom. Um, that's going to be when I think you're a success.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Troy, for coming on today and sharing some of your story, your expert insight. It was so great to talk to you. I wanted to end by asking, like, how can our listeners find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so you can find us at seller.tools. And if you want to reach out to us, you can reach us at hello@seller.tools. As you mentioned, we have a Facebook group, FBA Kings, a really great community to share, again, your thoughts, experience, insights, glean some insights too from the community as well. Great place to find us there. And then, yeah, we'd love to. We've got a lot of free resources, again, on the ManyChat side, free flows that you can find at seller.tools, all kinds of good stuff. You'll find it right there on the site, free resources, whether it's, again, free flows that you're wanting to look at. We have a URL generator, all kinds of cool stuff to give you some value. We have a free 14-day trial where you can try out all the tools for yourself. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you, see you, and try out Seller Tools.
Yeah, and as someone who's used Seller Tools a long time ago, and everyone in the world knows how amazing you guys are in terms of obviously the ManyChat side, but everything else that you guys do, I definitely recommend. At the very least, try the trial. You'll fall in love with it. So thank you so much, and we'll definitely have links for that as well for everyone that's kind of listening here today. So thank you again, Troy, and talk to everyone next time on Morning Marketing Machine. All right.